Back in the summer of 2013, I lived in a rough part of Long Island, Mastic Beach. If you've ever heard of it, you know it's not exactly the safest place to be. Crime was common, and if I'm being honest, I never really felt like I fit in there. But I was young and didn't have much of a choice. One hot August afternoon, I decided to go to the beach. It wasn't much more of a stretch of dirty sand and murky water than anything else, but it was only a 5-minute drive from my house. I technically wasn't even supposed to be driving alone, since I only had a learner's permit. But there were no cops in that area, and I figured it wouldn't be a big deal. When I pulled into the lot, I noticed something strange. Not a single car in sight. Normally, even a rundown beach like this had at least a few people around, families. Teenagers, maybe a couple of older folks, fishing, but today, just silence. Still, I had already driven out there, and I didn't feel like turning back. I grabbed my chair, towel, and bag and set up near the shore. The sun was high, and the waves lapped lazily at the sand. I waded into the water up to my knees, but the second I saw the algae floating around, I decided, nope, not today. I walked back, dried off, and sat down, enjoying the warmth of the sun. After a while, I got bored and decided to take a walk down the beach. I had no destination, just a slow, aimless stroll along the shoreline. The air was thick with the salty scent of the ocean. But after about 10 minutes, something changed. The smell hit me out of nowhere. At first, I assumed it was just rotting seaweed. Maybe some washed-up fish. It wouldn't have been the first time. But as I kept walking, the smell got stronger and said, almost acidic, burning the back of my throat. Something was wrong. I should have turned back, but my curiosity got the best of me. I kept my eyes straight ahead, focusing on the sand and the occasional pile of trash littering the beach. Then, out of nowhere, my foot hit something solid, something hairy. I looked down, and that's when I saw her, a severed head. It took my brain a second to even process what I was looking at. The skin was pale and stretched tight, her mouth gaping open in an expression of sheer terror. Her eyes gone. Her eyes were frozen wide, as if she had died mid-scream. I don't remember the exact noise I made, but it wasn't human. A scream tore from my throat, and before I even realized what I was doing, I was running. I sprinted so fast back to my chair that my vision blurred. The moment I reached my bag, I doubled over and threw up, partly from the sheer exhaustion, but mostly from the gut-wrenching horror of what I had just seen. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher must have heard the panic in my voice, because she immediately told me to stay put, that officers were on their way. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. I kept glancing over my shoulder, paranoid that someone or something was watching me. When the police finally arrived, I could barely get the words out as I pointed them toward where I had found the body. One officer put a hand on my shoulder, nodding grimly. "You did the right thing," he told me. Then he told me to go home. They were shutting down the beach. I didn't sleep that night. For weeks, I checked the news obsessively, waiting for updates. Almost a month later, they finally identified her. Diane Ross, 63 years old. She had been murdered, stabbed in the back of the neck. But the worst part, they never found who did it. There were no solid leads, no DNA matches, nothing. The case went cold. Even now, 11 years later, I still think about that day. Sometimes I wonder, did the killer come back to check on their work? Were they nearby when I stumbled across her? I never went back to that beach again, and I never will. I go to my grandparents' house in Brittany every summer with my family. They're lucky enough to live on a cliff right next to the beach, which is honestly the best part of the trip. It's a beautiful place, but a little isolated, and to get to the beach, you have to take one of 2 staircases built into the rocks. One of them is close to my grandparents' house. The other is way at the opposite end of the beach. The place is big, but there aren't many ways in or out, which wasn't something I ever really thought about until last year. I've been going there since I was a kid, but now that I'm 18, I don't really do the same things I used to. I don't build sand castles with my younger siblings or go swimming with my parents anymore. Instead, I started climbing the cliffs, not the steep, deadly ones, but the semi-collapsing, rocky areas that were kind of like natural hiking trails, if you knew what you were doing. I'd do it for fun, but never really thought much of it. That detail became important later. One night last summer, after dinner, I decided to take a walk on the beach alone. No one else wanted to come, but I had done it plenty of times before and didn't think twice about it. I walked down the stairs and found a quiet spot on the beach to sit, smoke a joint, and listen to some music. I was relaxed, just staring out at the ocean, when I noticed movement in my peripheral vision. A man was walking along the beach. At first, I didn't think anything of it. It was a public beach, after all. But after a few seconds, I realized he wasn't just walking. He was walking toward me. I turned my music down slightly, still pretending not to notice him. But the second he got close, he started talking. "Hey, you look familiar. Have we met before?" His voice was casual, like he was just making conversation, but I felt uneasy. He had a shaved head, square glasses, and tanned skin, the kind of tan you get from working outside all day. He looked like he was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. I shook my head no. He didn't take the hint. "I think I saw you here earlier today." I shrugged, hoping that would end the conversation. But he sat down on a rock next to me. I kept my body turned slightly away from him, hoping he'd realize I wasn't interested in talking. But he just kept going. He told me he loved the beach, how nice the weather was, how he liked that I was a nice girl. Then, out of nowhere, he said something that made my stomach drop. "It's rare to find nice girls. I'm glad you're not a..." The way he said it sent a cold chill down my spine. It was the kind of sentence that let me know exactly what kind of guy he was. Then he started asking me personal questions. "What's your name? Where do you live?" I ignored him. That was when he leaned in closer. His expression never changed. He kept that same weird, forced grin on his face, but his body language was different. He wasn't just sitting near me anymore. He was looming. That was when I realized something that made my stomach turn. The only way off this beach was the staircase, and this guy was sitting right between me and it. There was no one else around. We were completely alone. I felt my heart start to race, but I kept my face neutral. I didn't want to let him see how scared I was. He clenched his fist slightly, but still smiled, like he was getting frustrated but trying to hide it. "So, are you really a nice girl? Why won't you talk to me?" I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew I couldn't stay there, but I also couldn't let him know I was panicking. Then I saw it. To my left, just a few feet away, was one of the smaller cliffs I had been climbing all summer. It wasn't too steep, and I knew I could get to the top in seconds. If I made it, I could run along the narrow path and straight home. I took a deep breath and stood up. "I don't want to talk anymore. Have a good night." His expression shifted for the first time. He looked startled. Then, for a brief second, he turned his head and glanced toward the staircase. That was the moment I knew he had planned to block me from leaving. I didn't hesitate. I walked quickly toward the cliff, keeping my movement smooth, trying not to let him see how badly I wanted to run. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him stand up. The second I was close enough, I bolted. I scrambled up the rocks faster than I ever had before, scratching my hands and legs. But I didn't care. My only thought was, go, go, go. When I reached the top, I turned around and looked down. He was staring up at me. His grin was gone. His face was twisted in frustration, and he looked like he was about to do something terrible. I took off running. I sprinted the entire way back to my grandparents' house, not stopping until I was inside, with the door locked behind me. I told my mum what had happened, and the next day we went to the local police station to report it. I gave them the best description I could, and since it was a small village, they could have found him if he was a resident, but nothing ever came of it. French police don't exactly have the best reputation for follow-ups. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been able to climb that cliff. If I had hesitated even a second longer. If I had let him trap me on that beach. I haven't gone back alone since. I was almost 4 years old when I nearly disappeared forever. At the time, I was too young to realize just how close I came to being another missing child on the evening news. But now, whenever, I let my mind drift back to that hot summer day in Maine. I feel a cold dread settle in my stomach. My mother and I had gone to the beach with a group of other stay-at-home moms and their kids. It was one of those perfect summer afternoons. The sky was clear, the waves were gentle, and the sand burned the soles of my feet as I ran between the ocean and our tower. I don't remember much about the other kids I played with that day, only that we were all around the same age, splashing in the shallows, digging holes in the sand, and chasing each other in the foamy surf. I was a curious, adventurous child, always eager to explore. I wasn't the type to stay glued to my mother's side, and since we were surrounded by a sea of mums and kids, I felt safe enough to wander. Maybe I chased a seashell. Maybe I got bored of playing tag. I don't remember exactly what made me stray from the group, but at some point I did. That's when she appeared. I can still picture her as clearly as if it happened yesterday. A woman in a black one-piece bathing suit with cargo shorts, sunglasses, and her hair pulled into a bun. She looked like any other mum at the beach that day. She had that friendly, comforting energy that put me at ease immediately. Like the kind of woman who hands out snacks at a play date or ties your shoes if your parents aren't around. She smiled at me as if we already knew each other. "Hey there, sweetheart. You look like you're having a lot of fun," she said, crouching slightly so we were at eye level. I nodded, feeling an excited little flutter in my chest. At that age, I loved talking to adults. Something about being noticed, being spoken to like a big kid, made me feel important. "What games do you like to play?" she asked. I told her about tag, hide and seek, and my very favorite, playing pretend. She asked me all sorts of questions in return, smiling and nodding as if she were genuinely interested in everything I said. Then she tilted her head and grinned. "What's your favorite candy?" "Tootsie Pops," I remember answering proudly. Her eyes lit up. "Really? That's my favorite too. You know what? I have a whole bunch in my car. Would you like one?" The offer sent a thrill of excitement through me. Tootsie Pops were a rare treat, something I only got on special occasions. And here was this nice lady offering me one just because. I didn't hesitate. She held out her hand, and I took it without a second thought. Hand in hand, we walked through the crowd together. Looking back, that's the part that disturbs me the most. How easily I went with her. How natural it felt at the time. How nobody questioned why a little girl was leaving the beach with a stranger. I skipped beside her, completely oblivious to what was happening. I didn't feel scared. I wasn't hesitating or second-guessing. I wasn't even looking back to see if my mum was watching. If she hadn't seen me when she did, I wouldn't have stopped walking. I wouldn't have come back. I don't know how far we had gotten, maybe 20, 30 feet from where I had been playing, when I heard a sound that shattered everything. My mother, she was screaming my name at the top of her lungs. I turned my head and saw her jumping up and down, waving her arms frantically. She wasn't just calling for me, she was panicking. Before I could even react, I felt the woman's hand rip away from mine. She didn't say anything. She didn't try to convince me to keep going. She just turned and ran. I stood there, confused, watching as she darted through the crowd. She didn't look back once. I didn't understand what was happening. One minute, I had been walking with someone nice, and the next, my mother was running toward me, her face twisted in fear. She reached me in seconds, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms so tightly around me I thought she was going to squeeze the air out of my lungs. I had never seen her cry before, but when she pulled back to look at me, there were tears in her eyes. "What were you doing? Where were you going?" she asked, her voice shaking. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't understand why she was so scared. "The lady was going to give me candy," I said simply. She hugged me again, even tighter this time. It wasn't until years later that I truly understood what almost happened. My mother told me that she had been chatting with one of the other mums when she happened to glance toward the water and saw me walking away with a stranger. She didn't recognize the woman. She didn't know where I was going, but the second she saw our hands clasped together, she knew. She said she had never screamed like that in her life. The part that makes me sick to my stomach now is how quickly that woman ran. She didn't try to explain herself. She didn't act confused or concerned when my mother started shouting. She didn't pretend like it was a misunderstanding. She just bolted. That tells me everything I need to know. If my mum had been looking the other way when I wandered off, if she had been distracted for just a few seconds longer, I would have disappeared forever. I try not to dwell on it too much, but sometimes I can't help it. What was waiting for me at the other end of that walk? A car, a second person, a fate worse than I can imagine. I will never know, and that terrifies me. Last year, my family and I were vacationing in Myrtle Beach, staying in a high-rise resort right on the water. The days were filled with the usual beach activities, lounging by the ocean, swimming, eating out at local restaurants. But the nights were quiet. That particular night, I found myself unable to sleep, staring up at the ceiling well past 3:00 a.m., tossing and turning with no sign of exhaustion setting in. Prostrate, I decided to step out onto the balcony for some air, hoping the fresh breeze would help clear my head. The second I stepped outside, I was struck by how beautiful everything looked. The full moon reflected off the dark ocean, casting an almost ethereal glow across the water. For the first time since we had arrived, the beach was completely empty, stretching endlessly in both directions without a single soul in sight. There was something surreal about it, something peaceful, and in my sleepless state, I found myself drawn to the idea of taking a walk along the shoreline. It seemed harmless enough, a quick stroll, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at most, just enough to relax me before heading back upstairs. Without much thought, I grabbed my headphones, slipped on a t-shirt, and quietly left the room without telling anyone where I was going. At the base of the resort, there was a large outdoor pool area with an empty bar and 2 separate boardwalks leading down to the beach, each about 100 feet apart. Tall swaths of grass lined the wooden pathways, separating the resort from the sand. The entire area was eerily still, with no guests lingering by the pool or sitting at the tables. As I stepped onto the right boardwalk and started toward the beach, I noticed movement up ahead. A man was walking toward me from the water. A strange sense of unease settled in my stomach. I had just been on the balcony looking over this exact stretch of sand, and I knew for a fact that there had been no one there. Yet here he was, moving steadily in my direction, as if he had just emerged from the ocean itself. As he got closer, I could make out his features. A man in his late 30s with large, square glasses, a backpack slung over his shoulder, and clothing that looked slightly tattered. There was something about the way he carried himself that set me on edge. He didn't have the relaxed, carefree demeanor of someone enjoying a nighttime stroll on the beach. Instead, he looked anxious, almost like he was waiting for someone or searching for something. As we passed each other, we made brief eye contact. I gave him a polite nod, trying to brush off the uneasiness, but he said nothing. Even after I had walked past him, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Reaching the sand, I turned right and began walking along the shoreline, letting the cool breeze wash over me as I listened to music. The sound of the waves was calming, and for a moment I felt at ease, reassured by the idea that maybe I had overreacted. The sensation didn't last long. Within a minute, a strange prickling feeling crept up my spine, an instinctive sense that something was wrong. I removed my headphones and turned around. A dark figure was following me, though he was upshore, positioned between me and the resort. I recognized his build immediately. It was the same man I had passed on the boardwalk. A flicker of panic set in as my mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe he had simply decided to take a walk in the same direction. Maybe this was all just a coincidence. It felt ridiculous to assume I was in any real danger. Yet the way he had positioned himself, so that he was cutting off my access back to the resort, did unsit right with me. Trying to remain calm, I turned my gaze back toward the water and continued walking. A few seconds later, I glanced over my shoulder again. He was closer, no longer walking parallel to me. He was now moving toward me at an angle, shortening the distance between us with every step. My pulse quickened, and without consciously deciding to, I picked up my pace. Almost immediately, he matched my speed. Rationalization was no longer an option. This wasn't a coincidence. This was intentional. I stopped thinking. I turned abruptly in the opposite direction, and the second I did, I saw him pivot to match my movement. He wasn't just walking anymore. He was power walking, closing the distance between us quickly. The realization hit me all at once. I was being hunted. Adrenaline flooded my system as I broke into a run. He took off as well, matching my pace but staying upshore, positioning himself so that if I attempted to veer toward the boardwalk, he could intercept me. I had no plan, no sense of where I was going. I just knew I had to keep running for what felt like an eternity, though in reality it was probably closer to 10 or 15 minutes. I sprinted along the shoreline, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fought to maintain speed. Every time I glanced back, he was still there, relentless, never slowing. The strangest part of it all was the silence. Other than the sound of the waves and my own breathing, there was nothing. No voices, no passing cars, no distant footsteps on the boardwalk, just the overwhelming emptiness of the night. Then, up ahead, I spotted a faint blue light. Put squinting, I realized there was a small group of people sitting on a blanket in the sand. Relief surged through me. If I could get to them, I might have a chance to explain what was happening, to get them to help me. Summoning every last bit of energy, I sprinted toward them. As I got closer, my heart sank. The group consisted of 4 guys, surrounded by several empty liquor bottles. 3 of them were completely unconscious, sprawled out on the blanket in a drunken stupor. The 4th sat upright, barely registering my approach, his eyes half closed as he muttered something incoherent to himself. He was too far gone to notice me, let alone help. And then I saw the man stop in the distance, watching. I could almost see the moment he realized the state of the group, the instant he understood that they were useless to me. His posture changed. and without hesitation, he sprinted toward me at full speed. There was no time to think. Instead of running away, I did something I do unthink he expected. I ran straight at him before sharply cutting to the right, darting past him and sprinting toward the resort as fast as I could. The move caught him off balance, giving me just enough of a head start to widen the distance between us. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I kept pushing forward. The sight of the resort lights was the only thing that mattered. I didn't look back until I reached the boardwalk. He was still there, maybe 400 or 500 feet away now, still standing, still watching. Wasting no time, I sprinted toward the elevator, jamming the button repeatedly until the doors slid open. The second they did, I threw myself inside, mashing the closed door button with shaking hands. When I reached my floor, I bolted down the hall, unlocking the door to our room and slamming it shut behind me. I locked it, then double-locked it, then slid to the floor, trying to catch my breath. Even after my breathing slowed, I found myself crawling across the floor, afraid that if I stood up, he might somehow see me through the balcony doors. I didn't sleep at all that night.